I'm very excited. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Mike Ames Recruitment Show. The observant of you may have once again noticed that I am not Kirsty.
Still not Kirsty.
Still not Kirsty. Still to the disappointment of all. I know that. I know where I rank in your preferences. Kirsty, sadly, Kirsty's had an iron infusion. She didn't mind me telling people. She liked me to tell people because she thinks it makes her sound like Wolverine out of the X-Men. Like she suddenly can't go near magnets or anything. But the reality is it just really gives her a blinding headache. So I stepped into the breach like a hero and a great brother.
Get on with it now.
Crack on now. I just want to talk about myself a bit. So we are here to talk about how recruiters can thrive in a recession. So
that's more like it, yeah.
There we go. Mike, let's talk about this. So big and obvious question, I think, is we've all been through a recession in the last few years, 2020, COVID recession. Now, different cause, what we're about to face, is it going to be a different type of recession as a consequence?
Good question. Yes. The answer is yes. In fact, I've got a good news, bad news, good news story on this. And obviously we want to get through this very quickly so we can get to the good stuff. But this is really important because it is terribly relevant, which is why we're including it. Good news is that there is plenty of slack in the market. In other words, there's much more demand than there is supply. So if things did take a bit of a tumble, probably no bad thing, really. A bit more breathing space, probably make even more money, a bit more focus. So it's not tremendously bad news. The bad news, that's good news, actually. What am I saying? The bad news is that really 2020 wasn't really a recession. I mean, technically it was because we had 2 quarters of negative growth. But actually the underlying economy was sound. It's just that we couldn't figure out how to work with each other when we couldn't sit with each other in an office. As soon as we figured that out, work from home, Zoom came along, saved us all. Woof! And everybody had a really good end to the year. And of course, 2021 and 2022 were fantastic. So the underlying economy was strong. Plus, the government was pumping cash into the economy like nobody's business through quantitative easing and, of course, furlough and loans and God knows what else. Well, in this time, they're not going to do that. And the economy is shagged, basically. And interest rates could reach 3.75%, which is not good. Inflation 18%. And the Bank of England have already said that they expect the recession to last the whole of next year. Right. So we are talking 2008. We are not talking 2020, which means that all you had to do is get through a few months in 2020. But this is different. You really do need to dig in, right? Lean into it, as the Americans say. Can I say that, Peter, or not?
You can say. I'm going to allow it this one time.
I think we should lean into this. In other words, do something which is going to help you get through it and possibly even thrive, as we talk about it a little later. And that is the last piece of good news. Because the economy, if it does shrink, if you've got a really, really good position with your existing clients, suddenly there's more candidates around. So you're still getting some vacancies, but now you can get the candidates. So you can actually make more money. And my business, certainly in the 90s, we didn't shrink in that nasty recession at the beginning of the 1990s because we had really good relationships with our clients. And then we could suddenly find as many candidates as we liked. It was like a license to print money. So this, as you'll see, is not all a bad news story.
Yeah, there's going to be a challenge ahead, effectively. I can summarize a challenge ahead.
Sure.
But we've got a lot of capacity in the industry already. And if you do it right, you can grow through it. And when we come out of it, if you've positioned yourself well, you can absolutely fly, can't you?
Yeah. I mean, don't panic. That's the thing. Right? Don't panic. Don't be, you've got to do things. There's certain things I'm going to talk about in the show, which will help. And this is the 6th downturn. 6. I mean, what is that all about? And that's while I've been working, plus the one in the 70s when I wasn't working, when I was at school. But you can make this work for you. Be utterly confident that you can make this work. It's nothing to panic about, but you do have to do stuff for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move into the next question, really, which was on the description for this show. We said we were going to talk about why it can be a good thing, and I think we've touched on that now. But we also said that there are 2 things that you do need to do to reduce the threat to your business. Can you just talk us through what those are?
Yeah, very quick. Again, because I want to get to the positive stuff as soon as we can. 2 things, which I always say in these sorts of occasions. I said it 2020 and I said it, in 2008. Try and get between 3 and 6 months worth of money, cash, in your company. Because that means if you don't do a single tap of business, you'll be okay for 3 months or 6 months. 6 better than 3. It's not going to come to that. but it gives you that level of confidence, and it stops you from making those knee-jerk decisions where you let people go, so that when the market does pick up, you are not prepared for it. Above all else, what you have to do through this recession is do your best to keep your team together. I can't stress that enough. Keep the team together, because you'll make more money in the short term, of course, but also when things pick up, you'll be ready to go. And I think that's a really important point. Okay,
Mike, just to say, we've seen some comments coming through that some people are having difficulty with LinkedIn. I'm actually just going to pop on to LinkedIn and pop in the YouTube link. So if you've managed to pick this up, we're going to jump over to YouTube and join us there. It tends not to have the same problems. I've heard about this problem over the last few days from various other people who broadcast. So I am quickly going to drop in.
Okay. Whilst you're doing that, don't forget, obviously, people who are having difficulties with it, there will be a recording of this on YouTube itself, so you can watch it. Not as good as doing it live, because you can't ask questions, of course. And you know that I don't think you'll get the full magnificence of this shirt on a YouTube recording. Maybe you will. Have you done that, Pete?
Just doing it now.
I don't know why LinkedIn does this. I mean, it just drives me mad. I think sometimes we should just go over to YouTube and just be there all the time, because it just makes life a whole lot easier. But who knows? Anyway, so first thing is to get that cash in your bank. The second thing is to reduce your contracted spend. That means money you're contracted to spend with people. So sign up for a 3-year property lease. Well, you've got to pay that, like it or not. So it's very important to keep that to an absolute minimum, because if you don't and you spent it and you can't afford it, but you're contracted to pay it, you have to pay it really, or risk legal action. So if you've got a chance between signing a longer lease or signing a shorter lease but paying a little bit more for it, do the latter for sure. Okay, all right. So shall we press on, Pete? Hopefully people are being able to...
Let's plow forwards. Yes. Fingers crossed for that. So 2 major things you can do to reduce the threat. I think it's always nice to have small practical action plans in circumstances such as this. Let's move on to we said we were going to talk in some detail about 3 really important aspects of your business. I suppose the way to describe it is the 3 most important people in your business.
Stakeholder groups, yes.
Stakeholder groups. So the first one you wanted to talk about was your clients. And you put emphasis on to client care being super important in the run-up to and during a recession. So can you just say what that is, client care, and why it matters?
Okay, I'm going to flip those around, really. Tell you why it matters first. So in a real recession, 2008, 1991, the late 80s, in that kind of recession, people tend to have less work for recruiters, so they tend to use less agencies. When it's the opposite, when they're desperate for candidates, they'll use more agencies. Now, agencies are an overhead. You might not think you are, and that would be nice, but having been one myself, I can say it. It's an overhead. So if clients can manage with less of them, less people as their supplier group, their panel, their PSL, they will. So quite often what happens, in fact, what always happens, is most companies reduce the number of agencies that they work with. You need to make sure that you're north of the cut. In other words, you need to make sure that you are going to get business from people. Now, there's an assumption that you're going to get business because you are making placements. They seem to like you. Unfortunately, that is not an absolute certain shoe-in that you will make that cut. So the best way is to reach out and ask people. I know this sounds strange because you think, well, what happens if they say, I'm not going to make the cut? What do I do then? Well, at least you'll know. It isn't going to change it whether you know or not, but knowing in advance, you might even be able to do something about it in advance. Please trust me on this. Even those, I've lost clients that I was utterly certain that we would keep and we didn't. Right. So here's what you do. You go and see them in the name of service levels and service level reviews. And you ask one big question. The big question is this. Are we your first choice supplier? That's it. Okay. Are we your first choice agency? Now, hopefully some people will say yes. Most people will say no. You really must drill upon them. They've got to be honest about this. Tell me the truth because I need to know. No, you're not. You're one of a number of suppliers. Okay, that's good. If you had to reduce your number of suppliers by 50%, would I be in that group? Just, again, be honest with me. If they say yes, you would, and it's unequivocal, there's no hesitation, then you would. If they're kind of, well, yeah, probably, yeah, I guess so, yeah, that means you're not going to make it, right? So you've got to be, yes, stone cold, yeah, you would be in that group. Then what you need to do is you need to dig into 4 aspects of your service levels, right? So number 1 is the actual filling of a vacancy. So give me a score, and it's important to use the score, because if you don't use the score, then you'll get a wishy-washy answer. Give me a score of 1 to 10, 1 being I'm absolutely rubbish at it, 10 being could not be any better, or my people. How good are we, at putting a bum on a seat to actually manage that process, taking the vacancy, finding really good candidates, putting those candidates forward, managing that process, and at the end of it, making sure they get the person that you want. Score from 1 to 10. When they give you a number, if it's below 7, you're in trouble. And you're rarely going to get a 10, so it's going to be 7, 8, 9. If it's a 7 or an 8, then you really want to know, how could I improve this? And the way to do that is to say, okay, if I needed to improve this score by 0.25, what would I do? And you know this, Pete, because you do it, don't you?
I was just saying, giving away all my best tricks, Mike.
I know.
That is absolutely, when I do that with people's clients, you may think they'd be like, and they 80% of the time they'll think, they'll pause, oh, good question, and then they'll throw something at you that is small, actionable, and usually within your power.
And cheap or zero
cheap,
cost.
And almost always cheap. Just do something differently. It's not completely revolutionize recruitment. It's like, just batch them up and send them at the start of the day.
What was that one you had recently as an example? And this is really important. I know this sounds a bit, really? No, honestly, this is what you need to be doing. What was that thing you did? You reached out on behalf of a client and they thought they were doing something really well. It turned out they weren't. They'd be a bit pushy with it. I can't remember what they...
Yeah, so this, I'll tell you what, if it's going to be anything, it's probably going to be this. And it will get worse during a recession because your team start to panic. I've heard from not just one client, but several, that their team push candidates who the person feels is unsuitable. The clients, because they feel a little pressured and they feel a little guilty because you've put all this in, will see the person and then they're sat there interviewing someone, and within 2 seconds they're like, yeah, I was right, this person's a waste of my time. And you've just wasted an hour of your client's time when you do that.
And your client was not aware of that, were they? Your client was not aware of that.
No, the client didn't think that. They thought some other stuff that came out, but they didn't know about that one. And it's because we teach recruiters, we teach the people on the coal face, oh, you've got to present the candidate, you've got to push them. And that translates sometimes into pushiness, effectively. Do the job right. That's the key feedback there, was just don't, if I say that they're wrong, take on board what I'm saying.
Yeah. So this is called VOTC, Voice of the Customer. Yeah. We've done a show on this before, actually, but that's the first thing. The second thing is this. Okay, give me a score of 1 to 10, how good I am at taking the vacancy and understanding it. So how much do you think I really understand the vacancies when you give them to me? Obviously, that has an impact on the first thing we talked about, but, it's something that your people often don't understand the vacancies as well as they think they do, and the client will tell you. Number 3 is dealing with problems, escalation points. If something goes wrong, how good are my people? Scale of 1 to 10. How could they improve? 0.25. Same for all of them. And then lastly, which is one of my favorites, is supporting and understanding their businesses. In other words, what do you do when there's no vacancies? How do you keep in touch? Do you know what's going on in their business? Are you supportive? Are you attentive to them or not? And we know from the research that we've done with end clients, because we do this research from time to time, we know very well that can be a major problem. The fact that people they feel neglected when there's no work. They just feel like a source of money. So it's incredibly important to understand. Now, those 4 different items, get a score from 1 to 10, and how can we improve it on a 0.25 from each of those areas, and that will give you a good idea of how you stand with that client and how you can improve and whether you're going to make the cut. Do that now, because if you do it when the economy slips, it's too late.
Yeah, and it needs to be you. You can't give it to the team to do.
Yeah,
because they ain't going to mark their own homework.
No one's going to come.
And people don't want to tell them things.
The client says I'm shit, right? Oh, right, okay then. No,
yeah,
no one's going to do that.
Yeah.
Really, no.
And another quick tip, actually, Gavin. Thank you as ever. Pleasure to have you here, Gavin. Gavin makes a point here. It's not just the hiring managers. You've actually got to look at the senior people as well.
Great point, Gavin. Yeah, great point.
And I would invert that one as well, actually, because Mike, you had a classic example which you told only yesterday, where you went to the person who made the decision, but all the hiring managers hated the account manager you had in place.
They did, yeah. And then when there was a change of resource manager, The new people came in. What do you think about these guys? We hate them. They're rubbish, and they kicked us out. 3 million quid. That was.
Yeah.
If we
So
didn't do
you've got to go to
VAT
both
properly.
users and decision makers. Well,
Yeah,
let's
for sure.
move on. So that's the importance of understanding your client care, and it matters, as you say, because it gets cut. So the next group is your prospects. So they're not quite yet clients.
Yeah.
Now, last 10 years, I think, really, winning new business hasn't been a huge challenge for most recruiters, especially once they get established.
No.
Now, how might that change in a recession, and what should people do?
Well, clearly there'll be less work around, and some clients in some sectors will be completely unaffected. I've got a couple of clients in various sectors, and they think their demand is going to go up. And having listened to them, I agree with them. But in many cases, the sector will cool. And some clients won't have any vacancies at all. So, sort of akin to 2020, I guess. Perhaps not as dramatic, because it'll happen over a longer period of time, probably. But nonetheless, there'll be less work around, and there'll be more agencies chasing them. So some agencies will get thrown out, or not thrown out. That's not the right way of saying it. They'll be just sidelined. No one's going to say, "Hey, you're not going to do any more work here." They just don't get the vacancies anymore. I've seen it happen. In fact, I've been the victim of it, so I know it goes on. So you don't know until you're not getting the vacancies. But either way, you're going to need to go out and win new clients. And this isn't what's happened in the last 10 years, which has been relatively easy, where vacancy scraping can do it for you. You can just vacancy scrape, go out there, look for vacancies, and then try and turn that into a client. You'll still be able to do that, but it's going to be harder. Much better to have a system or a process which identifies potential high-value new clients, positions you, and then enables you to make a real solid pitch and gives the client very tangible reasons to use you. Now, we aren't going to cover this in detail today because we think it's really important. So what we are going to do is we are going to make that the subject of next week's show. So I'm going to show you a system that you can win, that you can use, proven system, high value clients, doesn't depend on key people. So in other words, it doesn't mean, so if you haven't got a really good new business developer, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be okay. It's fine. I'll show you how to do that. It's from the factory model that we do in our breakthrough program. So I think if you can tune in for that next week, then that will give you an indication of exactly what you need to do right now. Because again, when you need new clients, it's a bit late. You must start to think of it now. And we probably haven't had to have done that in the last few years, but we kind of do now. So I think that's kind of a crucial point.
If you're one of the smaller sized recruitment businesses that we work with, quite often the real breadwinner, 80% of the work comes from the owner, the people watching this now. And if you think you're working hard now, working hard when you're still the only person capable of bringing in work during a recession is going to be even more of a challenge. So investing in this now,
do it now.
Start to create freedom.
So I'm not going to give you the whole system in half an hour. I wish. I'm going to tell you some things you can do right now. Right now, you can begin this process to start and put things in place. None of them have any costs associated with them. Relax. You don't need to hire people or spend money on expensive software, any of that sort of stuff. It's just making the most of what you have right now. So I'm going to talk to you about that next time, and I'm really looking forward to it. So hopefully Kirsty will be back then, I would think.
Fingers crossed. What are you saying? So yes, that's going to be a good move. And of course, the other thing that drops off during a recession, which I know you've said before, didn't happen in 2020 because 2020 was different, is referrals.
Yeah.
So people rely on those sometimes. And again, a system that doesn't rely on those.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, there's certain things you can do to actually increase referrals. In fact, I'll try and cover that off next week if I think about it. But up to about 10 to 12%, you can actually increase the number of referrals you get just by treating people in a certain way, which might be useful. But really, you just need something that's going to work for you. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. If people have questions, comments, observations, please do throw them in as we sort of hit the tail end of the show now. Now is a good time. You're getting a feel for what we're talking about. If something's not clear, please ask us. As it is, I'm going to move into the third thing the third group, which is your team. Your team are, you've said, vitally important. You need to take care of them. Can you sort of say, it sounds silly to ask this question, why is the team such an important thing to focus on during a recession, and what should people do?
Okay, clearly in a proper recession like 2008 really wasn't, because that was a trigger. It was triggered by the collapse So it came very quickly. I think 1991's a closer bet where we kind of just drifted into it a little bit, like we're doing now. It just got worse, and everyone's saying, "Oh, it won't get that much worse. It's going to be okay." And it wasn't. You know, it was 13 months, 15 months. I can't remember now, and it was pretty bad during that period. And I think people start to worry. They see things happening. They see the number of clients that you've got drop. They see the requirement board drop. They start to worry. So number one is I'd have a conversation with them pretty much like now, really nice and positive. I think positivity is absolutely crucial, because what I'm telling you now in this show and what I'm going to talk about in next week's show is a proactive set of actions that you can take, which will increase your chances of doing okay. And the reason you can thrive in the recession is a lot of people will panic. A lot of people will get rid of people that they shouldn't too soon. And many companies, as we saw in 2020, will not be in a great position with their clients. And if you put a lot of effort into setting that position up, then it's not going to be so bad. How big is this market, Pete? Do you know how big this market is, recruitment market is in this country?
Oh, 40 billion?
40 billion pounds.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's say it's a really hideous recession. It drops down to 30 billion. 30 billion pounds. How much of that do you need? You heard that. I love that story. Two hunters in the woods, and they've left their guns back at camp. And they're walking along, and out comes this big grizzly bear. Right, and the grizzly bear starts to chase towards them real fast, as they do. And the one bloke turns around and starts running, and the other fellow says, "There's no point running. Can't outrun a bear." And the first bloke says, "You don't have to. I just need to outrun you." And it's kind of like that in business. You don't have to be brilliant. You just need to be better than the next guy, because then you'll get the business and they won't. And that's the mentality to have. And you need to communicate this with people. There is a plan. I know it's going to happen. We are prepared for it. It's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. The second thing to communicate is productivity is everything in a recession.
Yes.
Whereas when there's lots of work around, you can be a little bit slapdash, a little bit wasteful in the efforts that you have and wasteful in your, what can I say, in your use of vacancies. If we don't win them all, it doesn't matter because there's loads, right? Like London buses. But in a recession, you've got to make the most of every single vacancy, and you have to make the most of every single minute of every single consultant that you have. So measuring productivity in terms of your conversion ratios, for sure, in terms of the ratios against certain role types. We talked about this at Breakthrough on Tuesday, didn't we, Pete? You'd done some work for someone where you were measuring the amount of time it took to fill certain vacancies.
Yeah, they were set up very nicely. Their team very naturally were recording all of their activity. Every email was going on and being logged. Every phone call was noted. Every outreach on LinkedIn, those kinds of things. They were just quickly hitting the button so they knew what they'd done. Consequently, you can do some very simple maths to say, well, actually, I know a phone call takes this long. I know an email takes that long. I know a LinkedIn takes that long. And then you could see how much time each person was investing in each placement. It's just a quick question of a little bit of Excel work. And then you can see, okay, you can combine that with how much those people cost and how much they make when they actually make their placements.
Yeah,
and you can start to essentially see your contribution. Yeah.
Contribution. So I'm not saying you have to go to that degree, but have an understanding on where you can put the time that you have, particularly if your team does shrink a little bit, and it might, where you can put that effort to make the most money. And that's productivity. Productivity is going to be all important. So right now, what you can do is begin to make sure you've got the right metrics in place. Can I use another Americanism, dashboards? Can I use?
Yeah, that's fine. I think dashboards is universal now.
Yeah, okay. All right then. Yeah. Dashboards then. Get your dashboards in place so you know what the heck is going on. You know what vacancies to work on. You know how efficient your people are. And you know what your best clients are when it comes to turning around vacancies and helping you to make money. Be in control of that. We've talked about it before on the show, so that you can then begin to make the right decisions when things start to shrink. Okay. Now, we're coming to the end of our time. If you've got any questions, do put them in. And I'm sorry about the mess up with LinkedIn. It's just LinkedIn, really. There's not much we can do about it unless we just commit to YouTube all the time. I don't know whether we should do that. But in any event, if you've got any questions, put them in. You can, of course, watch a recording of this, which we will send out to everybody who's registered. So you will get to see it. Can I just summarize up, Pete?
You
Is
can
that
indeed. I'd love you to do that. We're doing well for time, so we've got time for questions. So yeah,
yeah? We've got
summarize
time for
for us
questions.
the key takeaway for people, and then if you can, give us the final tip. What is the single most practical thing people can do
I certainly
back
will.
of the show?
I certainly will. Okay, so the recession is coming. It's unavoidable. There will be less work about, not initially, but it will catch up with us. The companies that will survive that the best are the ones that treat their clients the best and are fully aware of what their clients think of them. Give your clients a voice, VOTC, find out and fix any problems that you've got now before the cut comes and it's too late. Those people that make the cut will actually be in a position to thrive because they'll get the vacancies, but now they can find the candidates. The money you can make if you're organized properly and are tapped into the right clients is significant. The second thing is you are going to need a client acquisition system that really doesn't depend upon A, lots of money being spent on it, because you're not going to have lots of money, and B, is not going to depend on very highly skilled or experienced people, because A, you might not have them, or if you do, you're probably going to be busy doing other stuff. So you need a system that works. We are going to look at that next week. There it is. Oh, hey, I pressed the wrong button, but could do that, couldn't I?
Where have
I think it's better with just me, actually. What do you reckon? Probably, yeah. Anyway,
No, nobody
right,
else.
who knows? But so I think we'll look at the system next time. You can begin to work at that right now. And then the third thing is there's no denial here. So let's begin to talk to the team about what's going to happen, the plans that you're putting in place, the confidence that you have, and the fact that they have to be productive. You're going to start to measure productivity a little closer, and we're going to really focus whatever we have on the place that we can earn the most money, because that focus above all else will make the most money for you. I mean, arguably it does in the good times, particularly in the bad times.
Excellent. And that's your final. Was your final tip in there, Mike?
No, I haven't done that yet.
Let's do that. What is that final tip?
Okay. And then we'll do if there's any questions or anything that you want me to cover off. So it's this. Start that process of finding out what your clients think about you. You can just do it now. You know, it is only those 4 things that I went through. You can ask what you like, but those are the 4 areas that we find as we do VOTC projects, and Peter's better suited to talk about this than anyone else, but those are the 4 areas where we get the most, well, it would be good if you did this, or actually, yeah, you know, you're not as good on that as perhaps other people are around here. And this sort of dawning appears that you need to be better. Now is the time to find that out and act upon it. The best case scenario is you come back and say, you're going to make the cut. You are our first choice supplier. And if not, well, yeah, you're going to make the cut because we really like working with you. And by the way, everything's pretty good, actually. You don't need to improve on anything. Cool. And if that's what you expect and that's what you get, you don't need to worry about it. But if not, now is the time. I know that's not very sexy, but now is the time to do it.
I agree. And if we have, I've remembered now, we've actually done an entire show on VOTC. So if anybody is interested, just drop me a message and I'll send you the link. That's going to be easy.
Yeah, Pete explains how to do VOTCs properly and yada yada yada. But
yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so final tip. Let's drop into the questions because we had one actually. There we go. It's from Gavin. So Toggle, which to those that don't know, Toggle is a time tracking tool that you can put on your web browser. And I'm presuming that's a question related to how to track the effort you're putting into the vacancies.
I really like Toggle because you can put it on your laptop, you can put it on your phone, and although I don't think it's a good idea to do it forever, if you just wanted to track how long it takes to satisfy a requirement, or how long does it take to build a shortlist, and then divide that by the number of people on the shortlist, and you've got a time per shortlist member, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or if you're doing a medium list, how long does it take to produce the medium list, which then gets turned in the shortlist by the qualifiers? So it's a really cool tool, and it doesn't take that much to use it, and it's free, which is pretty cool, even better, isn't it?
I would say don't try and use it to replicate what we were talking about earlier, where we had like a activity-based thing. If your team jump from vacancy to vacancy quite a lot during the day, phone call comes in about one vacancy, they've got to change the toggle. They're not going to they won't do it basically. So Mike's context of it's a way to get a finger in the air noddy ID for how long things take, but I wouldn't say it's a long-term solution. The long-term solution is to try and get the activities somehow automatically trapped in your CRM, your ATS, or some other place as well. So great point. Thank you for bringing that up, Gavin. And I think, actually, Mike, we're done. I think everyone else is. We've had some thank yous, like Karen. Thank you very much.
Karen. Hope this shirt was a little better for you as well, Karen. She was critical that I didn't wear a very nice shirt the other day, and she's quite right. What was I thinking? So hopefully the shirt worked for you today, Karen. Okay, so we'll see you next week. I'll be back with Kirsty. Now, I've got to be careful. Obviously, I realise what I said earlier. Obviously, we'll be very sad to see Pete go. However, we'll be delighted to see Kirsty back. I think that worked out quite well. Thanks again for stepping in at the last minute, Pete. Really appreciate it. See you all next week. Be positive, and let's go get them.